In this example, we're going to look at the language and notation of integers. Write the given numbers or mathematical expressions using correct language, using the words opposite of, negative, positive, plus, or minus. So now that we've been introduced to integers, we know that we have numbers that are now negative and positive. You've seen the words plus or minus before because plus is a number we use to represent addition, and minus is a word that we use to represent subtraction. We also have a new term, opposite of, and we saw that that's the reflection of a number about 0 on the number line. But all three, opposite of, negative, and minus, use the same symbol, and it looks like this. But they do have different meanings. The meanings are connected, but we want to be able to determine which meaning is being referenced when we're looking at a problem. So we're going to practice using these different language terms to represent our numbers. So notice for this first one, we can refer to this as -6 or the opposite of 6. It's more common to use -6, so that's what we're going to write. Notice that there's nothing in front of it, so we're not combining it using subtraction, so we're not going to use the word minus. So let's just write -6. Now for the next problem, we have two of these symbols out front. Okay? So there's two ways we can think of this. It's not representing subtraction because there's no number in front of it. We're not subtracting or minusing -6. But we can think of it as the opposite of -6. Okay? So typically when we have these two signs next to each other, that's a nice way to think of it. You could think of it as -6, but simplified, we could think of it as the opposite of -6. We'll write opposite of -6. Now for the next one, we have this symbol and the 8. So it might be tempting to say plus 8, but we're not adding this to any other number. There's no number in front of it. So this plus is referring to the sign of the number, which is positive. So here we would write +8. For part D, we have an 8 but no symbol. So we learn that typically we don't write the positive sign in front of a number, but sometimes we'll be simplifying and we will get the positive sign there, so it's good to know what it means. So this is equivalent to +8, but we would read this as just 8. We have one more problem on this screen, and we see the two symbols next to each other separated by the parentheses, so it's typical to this one. So notice how this one had a symbol outside of the parentheses and a number. So again, when we have two symbols, it's nice to refer to one of them as the opposite. So we could say -8, but that seems pretty confusing. So if we say the opposite of +8, we now have an understanding of what that means. We would reflect +8 about the reflection line at 0. So we will say the opposite of +8. So those are our results. Now let's look at the next slide, which has some addition and subtraction built in. So you've probably seen a problem like this many times before, and we read this as 3 + 8. So I know that this plus is indicating addition. This sign means addition and not a positive sign because it's connecting two different numbers. So it's between these two numbers, so it's telling us to perform the operation of addition. So that's why we're going to use the word plus. So 3 + 8. Similarly, in this problem, notice that we have two numbers with the symbol in the middle, which is going to represent addition, and we're going to say is plus because it's connecting the two numbers. It's telling us an operation to perform. So this example, we would say, oh, good grief, that the first symbol is representing the sign of the 3, so this is -3. This represents addition, plus, and the number 2. So -3 plus 2. Our next example has multiple symbols. So in the previous examples, we saw something before where we had these two dash symbols next to each other. And we usually said, or in the other ones we said, the opposite of a negative. But in this case it's a little different because there's a 3 in front. So that's telling us that this symbol is representing the operation between these two numbers. So this is a subtraction symbol, whereas this symbol is telling us the sign of the 4. So we would read this expression as 3 minus -4. Okay? So this is a subtraction symbol, and this is the sign of a number. And finally, this last problem, well, that's a whole lot of dash symbols. Okay? So this first one out front, there's nothing in front of it. It's referring to the sign of this number. So this is -2. Similarly, this symbol right here is referring to the sign of 7. So this is -7. The one in the middle is what's connecting -2 and -7 as an operation. So this represents subtraction. So to write this, we would state the first number, which is -2, the operation minus, and then our second number, -7. And those are our results for these problems.